There's a moment that arrives without warning. It doesn't knock. It doesn't announce itself. It simply slips into the quiet like a breath you didn't know you were holding. You might be brushing your teeth, or waiting for the kettle to whistle, or staring blankly at a screen you're not really watching. And then it happens. A small voice inside you rises fragile but clear. Not shouted, not even spoken, just felt. I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. It's not a breakdown, not a dramatic fall to your knees. No one would even notice from the outside, because you're still standing, still functioning, still holding everything together as you always do. But inside, something cracks a little more each time. Something tired, something quiet, something you've never given permission to speak too loudly. Because you've learned how to carry weight in silence, how to nod and smile while your chest tightens, how to steady your breath when your world feels like it's tipping, how to make exhaustion look like grace. People think you're fine. You act like you're fine. You even tell yourself you're fine. But you're not fine. You're simply practiced. You've rehearsed this role so many times that even you believe the script. Strong, capable, reliable, unshakable. Except you are shaking, just not where anyone can see it. The shaking happens in the spaces between tasks, in the seconds before you fall asleep, in the silence that follows a long breath. That's where the truth tries to find you. The truth that you're tired. Not just tired in your muscles, not just tired in your schedule, but tired deep inside your bones, in the place where you've buried all the things you never had space to feel. The truth that you've been carrying too much for too long, and you don't even remember how you got here. And yet, you keep going, because you always do. You didn't wake up one morning and decide to carry it all. No one handed you a checklist titled, "Here are the burdens you must bear." It never happened like that. It was smaller, quieter, more subtle. It started with little things, moments when someone else didn't show up, moments when responsibility slipped through another's fingers and landed in your lap, moments when you told yourself, "It's okay, I can handle it." And you could, at first. So you stepped in, and then you stepped in again, and again, until stepping in became normal, until carrying what wasn't yours started to feel like it belonged to you. You didn't plan to become the one who holds everything. You became it by default, by necessity, by habit, by the quiet agreement that if no one else will, you will. And slowly, without even realizing, you stopped waiting for help. You stopped expecting anyone else to pick up the pieces. You became the fixer, the steady one, the one who doesn't falter. You convinced yourself that being able to handle everything was strength. That being strong meant never needing, never asking, never breaking. But the problem with always handling it is that people start assuming you don't need support. They stop asking how you are. They stop noticing the weight you're under, because you look like you've got it covered. And in some twisted way, you start believing them. You start measuring your worth by how well you can endure, by how much you can suppress, by how little you demand from others. You become proud of your ability to swallow pain with a smile. You become fluent in minimizing your own exhaustion. You tell yourself stories like, "I've been through worse," or "Others have it harder," or "It's not that bad." But every time you do, you silence another part of yourself. The part that's begging to be acknowledged, the part that's drowning under the weight you've so carefully hidden. And the weight grows, not all at once, but one invisible layer at a time, until you can't remember what it felt like before you were carrying everything, until the act of holding it all together becomes who you believe you are. And now you wear it like armor, heavy, familiar, unspoken. But armor, even when familiar, is still a burden, and you're tired of carrying it. Long before you became the one who holds everything, you were simply a child, wide-eyed, curious, soft, unfiltered. You weren't born carrying burdens. You weren't born reading the room. You didn't enter this world knowing how to shrink yourself for the comfort of others. But the world teaches fast. It teaches in ways too quiet to recognize at first. You noticed tension before words were spoken. You sensed when people were upset, even when they said they weren't. You learned how to tiptoe around moods, how to anticipate what was needed before anyone asked. You became careful, observant, hyper-aware. And somewhere along the way, you internalized a dangerous lesson. It's safer to be small, safer to be easy, safer to be helpful, safer not to need too much, safer to earn your place by making life smoother for others. So you adapted. You lowered your voice when it shook. You softened your presence when emotions grew sharp around you. You smiled when you didn't feel like smiling, because peace was more important than honesty. You made yourself easy to love by becoming low maintenance. And people responded. They praised your maturity. They admired how reliable you were, how calm, how understanding, how strong. And it worked until it didn't. Because what they didn't see, what even you didn't fully see, was the cost. Every time you made yourself smaller to avoid conflict, a little piece of your voice was lost. Every time you held back your truth to keep things smooth, a layer of your own needs disappeared. Every time you anticipated someone else's comfort before your own, your presence grew fainter. You became skilled at managing others while neglecting yourself. You became the one who sensed the emotional temperature of every room, adjusting accordingly so no one would be uncomfortable except you. And now, after years of this silent training, you've become excellent at disappearing into usefulness. Excellent at carrying what was never meant for you. Excellent at functioning while feeling invisible. But even the strongest child eventually grows tired, because there's a limit to how much shrinking one person can do before they vanish entirely. And somewhere, buried beneath all your carefulness, that small child still lives, still waiting, still hoping someone will finally see them. Finally say, you don't have to hold it all. You never did. There's a kind of tired that sleep doesn't touch, a kind of exhaustion that settles into your chest, into your stomach, into the spaces between your ribs. It lingers beneath the surface of your smile. It lives behind the polite nods and the "I'm fine" that you hand out like reflexes. Because you've been holding it all together for so long that unraveling feels dangerous. You've learned how to function while quietly falling apart. How to show up even when you have nothing left to give. How to offer comfort to others when you are the one silently begging for someone to comfort you, and yet you keep going. You answer the messages. You show up to work. You fulfill the roles. You listen to others' problems and give advice you can't follow yourself. Not because you don't need rest, but because you've forgotten how to receive it. The kind of rest you need isn't a weekend nap. It isn't scrolling through your phone at midnight, pretending that distraction counts as relaxation. It isn't a vacation that you'll return from just as depleted as when you left. The rest you crave is deeper. The kind where you're not measuring your worth by how productive you've been. The kind where your body isn't always braced for the next emergency. Where your mind isn't scanning for what could go wrong next. But you've trained yourself to believe that stopping is dangerous. That if you pause for even a moment, the entire structure will collapse. Not just your plans, you. Because your identity has been built on endurance. You've equated survival with strength for so long that letting go feels like failure. You carry other people's chaos to protect them. You manage their emotions so they won't have to face their own discomfort. You apologize for things you didn't cause say yes when everything inside you is screaming no, and call it love. But what about you? Who steadies you when you're shaking? Who holds your hand when you're falling? Who says, "You've done enough," when you keep piling on more? This exhaustion isn't weakness. It's the natural consequence of living like your needs are optional. It's the price you pay for pretending peace while holding unspoken storms inside. And you've paid it for far too long. They call you strong. They admire how steady you seem, how calm you stay when others crumble, how reliable you've always been. And you nod, you smile, you accept their praise, because what else can you do? But inside, a small voice whispers, they don't see the cost. They see your ability to hold it together, but they don't see what unravels inside when no one's looking. They see your patience, but they don't see the tension that knots your chest when you swallow your truth. They see your consistency, but they don't see how often you choose silence to avoid disappointing others. And over time, their admiration becomes a cage, a trap you helped build, because every compliment reinforces the role. Every "you're so strong" ties another knot in the rope that binds you to the performance. You become afraid to let the mask slip, afraid that if you show your weariness, the version of you they love will disappear. Afraid they'll think less of you if you finally say, "I'm not okay." So, you keep playing the part. The one who always knows what to do. The one who absorbs the chaos. The one who makes things easier for everyone else. The one who sacrifices without asking for anything in return. And because you do it so well, no one thinks to ask how you're really doing. They assume you're fine, because you've always been fine. They don't see the nights you sit alone, replaying conversations, doubting your worth, longing for someone to simply say, "It's okay to not have it all together." But no one comes. And you've trained yourself to believe that needing help is weakness, that reaching out will make you a burden, that your role is to catch others, not to fall yourself. And so you carry it all silently, pretending that your breaking point is just another hill you'll climb, pretending that your exhaustion is something you can sleep off, pretending that you don't need what every soul needs: to be held, to be seen, to be allowed to lay it all down. But strength isn't found in how much you can carry alone. True strength lives in the honesty to say, "I can't keep doing this like this." In the courage to admit you're tired. In the softness to finally be real. And you're allowed to be real, even now. There comes a night when even silence feels loud, when the weight you've carried no longer asks permission to be felt. It simply makes itself known, in the heaviness of your chest, in the tightness in your throat, in the tears that rise without warning, not because you're weak, but because you've finally reached the edge, the quiet edge where survival is no longer enough. You sit there staring into the dark, and the voice inside is no longer a whisper. It's steady now, clear. I can't keep doing this, not as a failure, but as a truth that's been waiting for you to stop pretending, because your body knows, your spirit knows, that the life you've been living wasn't built for you. It was built around everyone else's comfort, around their expectations, around the unspoken fear that if you don't hold it all, no one will. But you were never meant to hold all of this, not their moods, not their disappointments, not their chaos, not their silence. You simply picked it up because it felt safer than being too much, safer than risking rejection, safer than asking for help and hearing nothing in return. And now you're tired. Not the kind of tired that rest cures, but the kind that comes from abandoning yourself too many times. The kind that settles deep in your soul. The kind that quietly pleads for mercy. And still, you hesitate. Because change feels dangerous when survival has been your identity. Because letting go feels reckless when holding on is all you've ever known. Because stepping back feels selfish when you've trained yourself to disappear for others. But hear this, you're not fragile for reaching your limit. You're not broken because you can't carry anymore. You're real. You're human. And humans aren't designed to live numb, to live shrinking, to live disappearing inside the needs of others while abandoning their own. You don't need everything to collapse before you're allowed to choose differently. You don't need permission to say, I'm done performing. You only need the courage to believe that peace was never supposed to feel so far away. And maybe this is where something softer begins. You don't need a grand moment to begin again. No dramatic exit, no perfect plan, no announcement to the world. Sometimes change begins in silence, in the softest decision, whispered only to yourself. I'm not going to keep doing this to myself. That's how it starts. Not with rage, not with blame, but with quiet honesty. You notice the old patterns rise, the urge to say yes when you mean no, to absorb others' emotions before your own, to shrink your needs so you can fit more comfortably inside someone else's world. But this time, you pause. You breathe. You choose differently. Not because you've become cold or unkind, but because you finally remembered yourself. You stop carrying what was never yours. You stop apologizing for needing space. You stop managing rooms you were never meant to control. You stop measuring your worth by how invisible you can become for the comfort of others. And yes, at first, it feels wrong, unfamiliar, as though you're breaking a rule you didn't know you were allowed to question. Because when you've lived in survival, peace feels suspicious. Rest feels uncomfortable. Stillness feels like something you haven't earned. But slowly, your nervous system begins to relearn safety. That it's safe to sit still. Safe to not be everything for everyone. Safe to let people feel what they feel without managing their reactions. And most of all, safe to need, safe to want, safe to exist fully, without permission, without apology. You begin to see that you were never broken. You were exhausted from roles you were never meant to sustain, from expectations you quietly accepted to avoid conflict, from being strong in ways that only drained you. Now strength takes on a new shape. It becomes softness. It becomes boundaries. It becomes the willingness to rest without guilt, to breathe without rushing, to stay present in your own body instead of abandoning yourself for others. And maybe for the first time in a long time you feel it. The lightness. The space you forgot existed beneath all that weight. The simple truth that you were never supposed to carry it all. You just got used to believing you had to. Now you know better. Now you choose better. Quietly, gently, powerfully.